can't tell you how many people I've seen come out of the military and take a job lower than they should because they just want to get in the door. I am not a fan of get in the door because you're starting over again, and where you are on that ladder, that's where you start your climb.
Hey everyone, welcome to VCEO, where veterans lead the way. I'm Jay Hernandez, and today my guest is Bob Hastings. Bob, thank you so much for joining us today. Bob is the former principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs, an Army attack helicopter pilot where he flew the AH-1Z attack helicopter, Brigadier General for the Texas State Guard 1st Brigade, and former Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at Bell. Currently, Bob, you are the principal for Robert Hastings LLC, strategy consultancy. Again, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
The whole point of VCEO here is to share stories about people who have made that transition from the military to civilian life. So I'm going to ask you right off the bat, in 6 words or fewer, can you describe your transition from military to civilian life?
Certainly. 6 words. I would start with anxious, deliberate, planned, assisted, smooth, and successful.
How did you come to those 6 words, really thinking about your transition?
Yeah, so 6 words obviously is a challenge. I mean, there are people that write books about this, but I thought through the journey. And if I were to take the journey and put like 6 chapters to it, if I were writing a book, those would be the 6 chapters. So the first one is clearly anxious. It's a significant change, and in fact, the longer you serve, it's probably even harder, right? I did my transition at 22 years of active duty, and it was really my only job I'd ever had. I did that practically right out of high school, so I was certainly anxious. But like any good military trained person, I put together a plan. So I was deliberate about where I wanted to go and how I needed to prepare myself. I studied, I researched. I networked, I found organizations to join, mentors, so deliberate and planned. My 4th word was assisted because I did get some good help. And I reached out, I found people who had transitioned ahead of me and learned from their experiences. I found people who were veteran friendly, even though they had not served in the military, and learned from them. And so certainly reaching out and finding assistance along the way was important. That led, I believe, deliberate planning and assistance led to that smooth transition. I mean, it was, in hindsight, I had a really smooth transition and eventually successful. I went right into the corporate job that I wanted.
You talked about having that plan, that deliberate plan ahead of time. So first question I'll have is about how early before your transition did you really start planning?
So I had it in mind probably about 3 years out. Because I was a career soldier, so I knew I was approaching 20. So I had it in mind about 3 years out. I actually got an assignment back to the National Capital Region just so that I'd be in the place I wanted to be for that transition. If I had been retiring from Germany or Korea or some of the outrageous military assignments that there are out there, it would have been a lot harder. So I worked with my assignment manager to make sure that I got an assignment back into the National Capital Region, which put me in the geography I wanted to be with the people I wanted to work with. I had, like a lot of military folks, different things that I thought I could do as far as the style of work. I could be a public affairs officer. That's what I was doing at the time. I could be a pilot. That's what I was qualified to do. A lot of military folks go into various leadership roles, business development roles, sales roles, human resources roles. I looked at all of that stuff and really weighed it against what were the opportunities, what was the pay like, what was the work like, what were the number of jobs that are available. Of course, what I really wanted to do was fly, because I was a pilot. But being a pilot's not a good career choice. You're one flight physical away from being unemployed. And commercial pilots are not necessarily held in the same leadership position that military pilots are. So I ruled that out, landed on public affairs, and I just started networking in the Washington, D.C. area. Again, lots of advice about what to do, where to go. I got advice about jobs to stay away from. And one thing I'd put up right now is find not only the career you want, the job you want, the type of company you want to work in, but the level you want to work in. And I can't tell you how many people I've seen come out of the military and take a job lower than they should because they just want to get in the door. I am not a fan of get in the door because you're starting over again, and where you are on that ladder, that's where you start your climb. And so I had one person who told me that with your 22 years of experience and your 5 years as a public affairs officer in a corporate world in DC, do not even apply for a job that's not a director. I knew people who took even non-management jobs who were senior to me in experience and qualifications who ended up behind me by years because they took the wrong job. So I've deliberately planned where I wanted to be and who I wanted to work with.
Just getting into a career sometimes is a little bit about timing.
Yes.
For it is if it's that availability for that position even there. So would you say when you made your transition that you really got, that first spot that you got, was that number one on your list, or was that further down, maybe 3 or 4?
Well, it wasn't my first interview. And when I say it's the job I wanted, it met all the requirements of the job I wanted. I didn't go as far as to say, the company I wanted to work for. I described the job. I interviewed I probably had legitimate 5 interviews before that 5th one turned into a, can you come back tomorrow?
Okay.
Probably 5 where they were good interviews, but didn't turn in anything until that 5th one.
Thinking about our viewers who are about to make that transition, who are especially looking for senior leadership roles, do you think that those types of questions that they receive at a senior leadership level are different than they might get at some of those other levels?
Well, I think it's how you present yourself, right? So the first thing I would say is to be completely honest about who you are and what you're trained in, and don't try to hide your military skills. I see resumes all the time. I'm wide open to helping people write resumes. And I see people who try to say, I was a company commander, and they try to write, I was the CEO of a logistics organization. Right? No, they were a company commander of a truck company. You're not hiding that you're in the military. Put on your resume that you were the commander of a truck company, right? But then after that, translate what you actually did. You planned, you budgeted, you did logistics, you did human resource management. Think about all the things that are in those roles and translate them into the kind of skills that employers are looking for. The other thing I would tell you is read the job spec very, very carefully. A well-written job spec from a company will tell you exactly who they're looking for. So be honest with yourself. Is that me? And if it is, then I'd say make sure your cover letter and your resume show that it's you, right? Use the language they use, highlight what they highlight, emphasize what they emphasize. Again, don't mislead because it'll show up. It'll show up in your interview. You'll get walked out and not asked back. Or even worse, it'll show up on the first day of the job when you can't do what your resume said you could do. But I think it's about being able to explain what you do in terms that employers value. And some of the things they value from veterans more than anything else is they do appreciate, and I think it's widely recognized, that veterans come to work with a get things done attitude. I was just in a conversation with a guy tonight for a business prospect we're working on, a fellow Army officer, and he said, you know what it's like, Bob, you give us a mission and we go get it done. I think employers recognize that, but you got to be able to explain what that means, right? You can problem solve, you can develop courses of action, you can manage resources, you can build and lead teams. So those are the kind of soft skills that veterans bring that I think apply to almost everybody that's spent more than a few days in uniform.
Did you see yourself as an executive and that's why you sought out those positions, or were you looking for something more that was just tied to here's what I've done in my life and I want to do that again?
Yeah, I think at the time I didn't understand what an executive meant, even the word, right? So
and what does that mean?
I think what does executive mean, or what does it mean that I didn't know that I was?
No. What is it like? Yeah, what does it mean to truly be an executive?
Yeah, so that's a good question. That's a really good question. So I'll back up to what I didn't know. So I don't think I was aiming for an executive role at the time because I didn't understand what it meant. I was aiming for a role with a level of responsibility and a level of authority and a level of compensation that matched where I thought I was in my life career, my life's journey, right? Looking back on it since then, I think an executive is a person that leads a business that happens to have a skill set that the business finds valuable, as opposed to a professional who has a skill set the business finds valuable. So to break that into the public affairs world, I think a highly compensated, high responsibility public relations person is very good at PR, very good at internal comms, very good at media management and messaging and all those skills. An executive is very good at business and can do those and can understand how those public affairs skills are used. Mm-hmm. That's why, whether you believe it's right or wrong, and I'm not necessarily a supporter, but I do believe that's why MBAs get so many job opportunities, because companies are looking for people who are business leaders who have a skill set. Mm-hmm. And so I tell people all the time when I mentor people in the public affairs space, when they're in their mid 30s or getting to be 40 years old, do they need to go get a master's degree in communications or a master's degree in business? I almost always say go get business and use that as now a smarter business leader who does public affairs. Just my point of view.
I just came from a conference recently. I believe you were at the same one as me, actually, where they had a lot of universities there speaking about their communications master's program. And one of the things that stuck out to me is a lot of these master's programs were starting to add more business aspect to them because they've recognized exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly. And so I'm an advisor to a couple of school programs, master's level programs, and I've been pushing to make them closer to MBAs, right? Really understand by the time you had a role like I had where I left Bell, I was in the C-suite, sat beside the CEO in the staff meetings, in the business meetings, in the strategic planning meetings. He could care less whether I could write or speak or edit or plan or design or any of that stuff. He wanted a business leader in the room. Mm-hmm. And then turned to me and said, okay, now how is your department going to help execute the strategy that you just helped write?
And it sounds like that could really apply to anything, not just public affairs.
Absolutely.
Anyone's background, wherever they come from, to have that business acumen.
It's the same thing. The HR leader who sat beside me was in that room as a business leader who helped write a business strategy. And then the CEO said, how does HR support that? And the same thing with the salesperson, right? Business leader first, write the strategy, lead the company. Now, how does your sales department help us get there? So that's to me, that's the difference between executive and just professional.
For a lot of people, when they transition out of the military, what they'll do is they will leave whatever their last base is and return to their home of record. And a challenge that can present for a lot of people is having a different network, or perhaps not having an established network for that. What do you say for people going into that kind of a transition? How can they help make it to where they have an easier time getting into the career fields they want, especially in leadership roles?
Yeah, so I think it's a very personal decision, right? So when you leave the service and you decide where to go, I think a lot of people go back to the home of record because they go back to the support structure, right? So they're leaving the military support structure and they're going back to the one that's always been there, the family, friends, the town they grew up in. I would say, it's a personal decision. If that's that important to you, then that's what you need to do. But I would also say, ask the question that you just asked me, where is your network? And where can you best find the opportunities of where you want to go? You may come from a wonderful town with a wonderful family. Is there opportunity there for you with the skill set you have? You have to ask that question. Either way, I would suggest think about things the way I did. I decided to plant my flag in the national capital. I decided that 3 years before I got out. And so I started networking in that community 3 years before I left. because I knew that's where I was going to be, and I knew that. I would also say there are networks you can get into, like the professional associations. You know, you can get into the American Marketing Association, the Sales Associations, Program Management Association, professional engineers. Those are not, I didn't find them very helpful when I was on active duty, but they were pretty helpful in my transition, because that's where I met a lot of people. I talked about all the people I met that helped me, assisted in my transition. Some of them were military people that were on the path ahead of me, but some of them were people who had never served, and I found them through the associations. I went into, in my case, the Public Relations Society of America. I found their website. I downloaded the names and phone numbers of the board of directors, and I called them.
Really? Like just directly?
I just called them. I just called them, said who I am, here's what I'm interested in doing, here's what I want to do, can we talk? And I would say, looking back in hindsight, probably a 50 or 60% success rate in setting up meetings. People want to help. People want to help veterans.
That's a really good point. It is the desire that people already have to help veterans and leveraging that.
Right. Exactly. Especially if you're asking for help, not, you know, and not demanding it or not expecting it, but just reaching out and telling people, look, here's where I am. Here's what I need to do. I've been off doing this other thing with the last 18 years of my life, and I need to transition into where you are at. And I'd like to come talk to you and understand your career path, how you got to where you are, what you think the skills are to be successful in the type of work that you do, how my skills might fit into the kind of work that you do, and what advice you have for me to improve my skills or improve my networking.
Backing up just a little bit, when we had talked about some of the professional education, it may not always be practical for someone to get out and then go and pursue another degree, or maybe a first degree. But there is another option that I think some people look to do, and that's getting certifications. So what value would you really place on certifications, and are all certifications equal?
Yeah, so I think it depends on where you want to go and what you want to do, right? So the fortunate part of that question is that the Veterans Assistance Programs for Education right now are, I think, pretty robust. I think they're probably as good as they've ever been. So whatever you decide to do, whether you think the path you want to go to requires a degree, there's a pretty good way to go get your degree and get it paid for by the government now. Certifications are shorter and faster, but I think it depends still on what you want to get out of it. I think right now their IT certifications are everywhere. They're fast. They're easy to get to. Program management certifications, I think, are easy and fast. Easy not being easy to obtain, easy to get into is what I mean. You still have to prove yourself. But I think you just got to, again, it goes back to where I said I was deliberate and I planned. You got to figure out, where do you want to go? And is there a certificate path to get there? Or is there a degree path to get there? And then you got to balance it with your own personal needs. It's sort of like the decision whether to go back to your home of record or stay somewhere. College would be really hard to do with spouse and kids. So you just got to figure out the formula and decide which path you want to go to. That, like I said, the good news is there's money from the government, whichever path you want to go on.
You know, I was had a conversation with someone recently, specifically talking about an APR certification, and I had attended lots of different briefings, really just talking, trying to answer that exact question: is it worth it to get this this certification? And a lot of the stuff I heard, frankly, left me a little disappointed, because everyone was talking about, oh, it's a way to earn more money. It's a way to get that promotion. And I don't necessarily agree that that's always the case. But then I was talking with someone who had completed his APR plus M a few years prior. And the way he put it was, it's about raising the bar on the career field where you are.
Yeah. So APR, accredited in public relations. Just for anybody who's listening, it doesn't know that. So first of all, again, look at the career field. So APR, I'm a fan of APR. I actually am APR M #1. Helped push that through when I was in the Pentagon. I did APR to raise my own bar. That's how it was explained to me when I did it. And that's why I did it. I hate to say this, I don't believe APR ever got me a job. I
Mhm.
don't think it ever got me a promotion, and I don't think it ever affected my pay. I think my performance did all of that.
Mhm.
But the APR, the process of going through APR raised my own bar. Different career fields are different. In program management, those program management credentials are very important. They will get you a job. They will get you a pay raise. Uh, Human resources, the Society of Human Resource Management, SHRM, SHRM, the same thing. Their certifications will get you a job and will get you a pay raise. So you have to look at where it is you want to go and figure out
Mhm.
which ones help you or don't help you.
You said something so interesting just now about being APRM #1 and then pushing that program through, really raising the bar. One, I didn't know that, and that's a pretty fantastic fact right there. But also, I think it goes into a theme that I want to go into here, because we've talked a lot about our own personal journey, but that journey for other people. I think as leaders, a lot of us understand that leadership is a privilege, and it's also about helping others progress as well. So are there any examples where you can think of where you uh, did something for someone specifically to help their career, or was something that was perhaps provided to you and you remembered that and wanted to pay it forward as well? Is there any experience like that you've had?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, um, so leadership is such a broad subject, and there's so much that people talk about it, and people get confused between leadership and management and coaching and all that kind of stuff. Regardless of how you look at it, I think the first and most important role of leaders is to grow future leaders. If you're growing future leaders, leaders by their nature are good followers. And so you will get a better, stronger team if you're investing in the teammates who work around you to help them be leaders. I love. There's a cartoon. It's on my LinkedIn. I use it every now and then. It's the difference between a leader and a manager. It shows a sled with a person standing on the sled and the whip in hand, and 4 or 5 people pulling the sled, and it says management. And then it's got the same sled, 4 or 5 people pulling it, and the person all the way out at the front is leading, and it says leadership. And I always think it's really important to make sure that leaders understand their job is to create more leaders and help people develop and grow themselves. And that is the basis for a good, strong team. Um, I have a couple moments. And the guy that I think was the best um, leader early in my civilian life, and I remember this like it was yesterday, and he doesn't remember it at all, which is very interesting, because I've been told several times that I've told people things that changed their course, their career course, and I don't remember the conversations either because they were important to them. I was in a leadership development program at the corporate level. We were at a dinner with the chairman of the board, and there a little bit of alcohol was involved. So the language was getting a little loose. People were starting to complain and whine a little bit. And finally, somebody said to him, "Why don't you, as the chairman and the board members, do a better job of creating the strategy for the future and shaping it for us and telling us where we should go and how to get there and really guiding this company along?" And he took a draw of his cigar, a really deep draw, and he blew out the smoke, and he looked around and he said, "Is there anyone sitting at this table today who thinks there's a risk of them being fired tomorrow?" And it was silence. And I think most people like me was thinking, is he getting ready to fire us all? Because we were just whining. And then we realized he was just asking, do you come to work thinking you're going to get fired? And so the answer was no. No one in the room thought we were at risk of being fired. We were in this high development program. And he said, then figure out the right thing for the company and go do it. Don't ask. Don't wait for somebody else. Don't look up for the higher ups and the top of the corporation to set. If you're a leader and you know the right thing to do, just go do it, and you'll be rewarded by doing the right thing. And that has stuck with me. That was probably 25 years ago.
Mhm.
And I remember that conversation like it was last night.
In your role also, you've also had the opportunity to bring on lots of other people into your just different areas where you've been throughout your career. Are there any specific traits that you look for that you think stand out?
I look for a person whose view on the world is we instead of me. Probably the first turn off for me is someone who talks about themselves. And it's really hard in an interview because you're there to get a job. You're there to sell yourself. And you want to talk about the things that you did, and the other person wants to hear about it. But if the core of your conversation is about me instead of we, then that's always, to me, been a red flag. I happen to believe that the key to successful mission execution, whether it's military or corporate, is the power of the team. The team gets stuff done. And you would have heard this, having worked together with me in other places. I've often said, I'm not impressed with high-performing individuals. I'm impressed by high-performing teams. If you're a high-performing individual, I don't need you to tell me it. I know it. Others know it. And more importantly, one of the keys of being a high-performance individual is you build teams around yourself. So high-performing teams are the key to getting things done, and that's where you'll find the high-performing people inside there. I'm an absolute believer teams are the key to everything.
Throughout your career, I think when we look at our own personal successes, our team's successes, it's impossible to have the expectation that every single thing is going to be successful. And especially when you talk about, okay, let's go do something and just go get it done. Are there any lessons that you can say you've really learned from things that initiatives you started that perhaps didn't work out, or attempts that you did that failed?
Yeah, so I got to tell you, I can't even keep track of how many failures I've had, and I think I'm always suspicious of people that have nothing but success. One, they're rare. There may be someone out there who has that, and I just haven't met them yet. If you have nothing but success in your life, you've probably had very low goals, or you haven't tried for anything big. One of the things I'd learned in the military, and it took me a little while to understand the after action review, because the best after action reviews are the ones that focus on where we made mistakes and how do we not repeat it next time, as opposed to starting with how great this mission was. So I like to do after action reviews after almost any kind of a project, and start with what's one thing we can improve, and what's one thing we did that was right that we want to reinforce and do better next time. Another officer that we've both worked with who says every mission is a dress rehearsal for the next mission, right? So I do believe failing has got to be, it's become a bad word in our society, particularly in business and in the military, and it shouldn't be. Failure, we should look at failures as an opportunity to learn and do better. And then how do you mitigate the impact of a failure so people aren't hurt, but that you can get over it? One lesson, again, shown to me, a very, very simple lesson by a CEO. It happened at a company you and I worked at. We had an intern helping put together a letter writing campaign for the CEO. So the CEO wrote 300 letters. It was a fundraiser, like, I can't remember if it was Heart Association or March of Dimes, one of those organizations. The CEO was the chair. 300 letters went out asking other CEOs to join. And the CEO got a call, said, hey, the envelope was addressed to me, but the citation inside was to a different company. And so the CEO said, thanks. He called me in, called his assistant in. We called in the manager who should have been working it, the intern. And what we figured out is they had made an error in the mail merge. And all we knew is that 300 letters went out, and at least 2 of them were wrong, right? The one that we heard about and the one that should have been, but potentially all 300 of them were wrong. Mm-hmm. And so the CEO's assistant wanted blood for that. She wanted the head of somebody. I was standing there with the CEO, and the CEO looked at us and said, what did we learn? And the young lady who was the intern at the time, she said, I learned to double check and look at every name before I put it in the envelope, because technology could be wrong. And he said, That's all that's important, is that you learn something. And we left. What I didn't find out until days later is that he hand wrote 300 notes. He sent out the second wave. He hand wrote to every one of them. And he admitted, came to my attention that we had a mail merge problem and you may not have gotten the right letter. So I'm writing to you personally to ask you to join me in this cause.
Oh, wow. So that failure became another opportunity.
It's an opportunity to learn. I mean, that's a mistake that I know I would never make again. And I hope that intern and the manager who was between us would never let something like that happen. But what I learned more was the sort of gracious leadership that came from that CEO, because he could have fired 3 people on the spot there. And he chose not only that, but he didn't. Here's the amazing thing. He didn't tell us about writing the 300 handwritten notes. I found out about that. He just chose to do the right, honorable thing in his mind.
That really covers the what I had. So what I'm going to ask at this point is really an opportunity to give the floor to you on the advice you would give people about to make this transition, who have recently made the transition, or maybe they made the transition from the military a long time ago, and they're still looking to do it. But really, this is just a open floor moment for you to say what you would like to say.
I think there's some data out there that says that a lot of military people do like a stepstone transition, right? They hit one job and they're there for a year and a half or so, and they use that to springboard into something else. And I think that's fine. It's probably a safe approach. I would say make both of those transitions deliberately. But I would go back to, I'd go back to my 6 words, right? So recognize that the transition you're about to do, you should be anxious. If you're not anxious, then you're not respecting how difficult it could be if you don't get it right. So embrace, what do we used to say? Embrace the suck, right? Embrace the anxiety. It is good to feel anxious. It's just your body telling you that this is going to be tough and you need to focus on it. And then put together the plan, the deliberate plan, where you want to go and how you want to get there. Reach out and get your help, get the assistance, network, listen to people. I would take all those damn classes they offer in transition from the military. I don't know that any of them are great, but they're better than nothing. But reach out there. And if you do that, then I think you have every reason to expect a smooth and successful transition.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.